You think those dirty black fingers can do anything on a piano besides leave stains on the keys?
A woman in a $30,000 gown just said that, in front of 40 guests at Chicago's most exclusive supper club. Wesley Palmer set down his tray.
I've played piano since I was 6, ma'am.
Constance Hargrove looked him up and down and laughed.
I saw you staring that piano like a stray dog at a butcher's window. Don't embarrass yourself.
She threw $500 at his chest. Bills floated to the marble floor.
Pick that up and go play. Save these folks a trip to the circus.
Wesley looked at the piano. Constance had no idea. The man she just threw money at was about to play the one melody she'd been dying to hear again.
Something stir to you or Hamza?
The last thing her dead son ever wrote. Man, this dude almost made Juilliard. Juilliard. Want to know what happened? Stay with me. Chicago's South Side has a sound. Not the one they put in movies. Not gunshots, not sirens. The real sound. The rumble of the L train at 5:45 in the morning, shaking the windows of apartment buildings that haven't been repainted since the 90s. The hiss of a radiator that works when it feels like it. The low hum of a city that never quite sleeps, but never fully wakes up either. Wesley Palmer lived inside that sound. His apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a walk-up in Inglewood. One room, one window, a hot plate balanced on a milk crate, and a mattress on the floor. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a hand. He'd been meaning to report it for 6 months. He never did. There were always bigger things to worry about. On the wall next to the window, taped at eye level, was a printed diagram of a piano keyboard. 88 keys, black and white, stretched across 2 sheets of paper he'd taped together at the seam. The edges were curling. Some of the keys had faint smudge marks where his fingers had pressed too many times. Wesley practiced on that paper piano every morning before work. No sound, just fingers moving across ink and printer paper. If his neighbors had looked through the wall, they would have seen a grown man sitting on a folding chair, eyes closed, hands floating over a picture, and they would have thought he was out of his mind. But Wesley wasn't crazy. He was remembering. He started playing at 5. His mother, Arlene, cleaned houses on the North Shore. Big homes, white families, grand pianos in living rooms that nobody touched. One afternoon, she brought Wesley along because she couldn't find a sitter. The family's Steinway sat in a sunlit room. Wesley climbed onto the bench and pressed a single key. The sound filled the room like a voice. He didn't stop pressing keys for 3 hours. Arlene couldn't afford lessons. But she found someone who didn't charge. Theodore Dawson, everyone called him Teddy, was a retired jazz pianist living in a small house in Bronzeville with an upright piano that had a crack running down the left side of the cabinet. He'd played backup in clubs across the South Side for 40 years, never made it big, never seemed bitter about it either. Teddy heard Wesley play once and said 5 words. "Don't you waste this, son." He gave Wesley free lessons every Saturday morning for the next 12 years. Classical first, Bach, then Mozart, then Chopin. When Wesley's hands got strong enough, Teddy started feeding him jazz, improvisation, rhythm, the kind of playing that doesn't come from a page, but from somewhere underneath the ribs. By 16, Wesley won a full scholarship to a summer pre-conservatory program. By 17, he could play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor from memory, a piece most college seniors still struggled with. By 18, he auditioned for Juilliard. He made callbacks. Then the phone rang. His mother had suffered a stroke. She was 51. No insurance, No savings, no husband. Wesley's father had left when Wesley was 3, and the only thing he left behind was an empty closet and a utility bill. Wesley withdrew his Juilliard application on a Tuesday afternoon. He remembers the weather. Overcast, 42 degrees. The woman at the admissions office asked if he wanted to defer. He said no. She asked if he was sure. He hung up. He took a job bagging groceries, then a job bussing tables, then another, then another. Each one a little further from the piano, each one a little closer to the thing he was trying not to become. A man whose best years were behind him at 20. His mother recovered partially. She could walk, slowly. She could talk, mostly. But she needed full-time care, and full-time care cost full-time money. Wesley moved her into a care facility on the west side. The monthly bill ate everything he made. Some months he covered it, some months he borrowed. Some months he just showed up and begged them not to send her home. The last time Wesley played a real piano was 4 years ago. He drove to Teddy's house on a Sunday evening. Teddy was 81 by then and losing his eyesight. He couldn't see the keys anymore, but he could still hear everything. Wesley sat down at the old upright and played for 2 hours straight. When he finished, Teddy put his hand on Wesley's shoulder. His grip was still strong. "The music doesn't leave you, son. You leave it. And it waits." Wesley nodded. He drove home. He didn't go back. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He was ashamed. Ashamed of the grocery stores and the restaurants and the aprons. Ashamed that the boy Teddy believed in had turned into a man who carried plates for people who never looked at his face. 8 months passed. Wesley didn't visit, didn't call. Now, at 28, Wesley was 3 weeks from losing his apartment. The rent was 2 months behind. His mother's facility had raised rates again. He'd applied for a night shift at a warehouse in Cicero. $12 more an hour, steady work, benefits. The only problem was the schedule. It overlapped with Tuesday nights. Tuesday night was the one night a week Wesley walked 14 blocks to Greater Hope Baptist Church, where the pastor let him use the old piano in the basement. No audience, no pressure, just Wesley and a slightly out-of-tune instrument in a room that smelled like floor wax and old hymnals. That was his last thread. The warehouse job would cut it. The application sat on his kitchen counter, next to an overdue electric bill and a photograph of his mother holding him at age 6, the year he first touched a piano. He hadn't signed it yet. On the evening everything changed, Wesley arrived at the Bellamy at 6:15. He entered through the service door on the alley side, the way staff always did. The main entrance, brass handles, frosted glass, a doorman in a black coat, was for guests. The Bellamy was a restored 1920s supper club on Chicago's Gold Coast. Crystal chandeliers, dark walnut paneling, white tablecloths so crisp they looked like they'd snap if you folded them wrong. The kind of place where a single entree cost more than Wesley's weekly groceries. Tonight was a private event. The Hargrove Foundation's annual charity gala. 40 guests, black tie, 6-course dinner, live music. Gregory Ashworth, the restaurant manager, gathered the staff in the kitchen before doors opened. Gregory was the kind of man who smiled too much and meant too little. He clapped his hands twice like a grade school teacher. "Listen up. Mrs. Constance Hargrove is our most important client. She has hosted this gala here for 5 years running. Whatever she wants tonight, the answer is yes. Whatever she needs, we provide it before she asks. No exceptions, no excuses." Nina Gallagher, the server working the east section, leaned toward Wesley and whispered, Translation: smile, nod, and pretend you don't exist. Wesley adjusted his bow tie in the reflection of a steel prep counter. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He'd been pretending he didn't exist for years. The kitchen doors swung open. The first guests began arriving, and across the dining room, past the white tablecloths and the candles and the low murmur of wealth, there it sat. A glossy black Steinway grand piano. Lid open, bench pulled out, waiting. Wesley saw it the moment he stepped onto the floor. His fingers twitched at his side, a reflex he couldn't control, like a heartbeat. He looked away. He had plates to carry. But the piano didn't care. It just sat there, patient. The way a good instrument always does. The way Teddy said the music would. Constance Hargrove arrived 20 minutes late, on purpose. The front doors of the Bellamy opened, and the room shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but the way air changes right before a storm. Conversations didn't stop, they lowered. Heads didn't turn, they tilted. Every person in that room felt her walk in before they saw her. She wore an ivory floor-length gown. Custom. The kind that didn't have a price tag because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. A strand of diamonds sat across her collarbone. Not flashy, not loud, just enough to remind you that the woman wearing them could buy the building you were standing in. 2 assistants walked behind her. A publicist followed 3 steps further back, phone already in hand, already managing the room before Constance had to. That was the system. Constance Hargrove didn't manage rooms. She arrived, and rooms managed themselves. She didn't greet people. She received them. A guest approached with a handshake. Constance placed her hand on top, not beside, not underneath, on top, the way someone does when they believe the exchange is a privilege they're granting. Her smile was precise, measured, the kind of smile that makes you feel thanked and dismissed at the same time. Constance was 56. Widow of Harold Hargrove, the shipping magnate who built a logistics empire across the Great Lakes and died of a heart attack in his study 8 years ago. She inherited a fortune valued at $1.2 billion and a reputation she had spent every day since reshaping in her own image. The Hargrove Foundation was her stage. On paper, it funded arts education for underserved communities across Chicago. The galas were legendary, covered by society pages, attended by politicians, photographed for lifestyle magazines. But the numbers told a quieter story. Less than 3% of the foundation's annual revenue went to actual programs. The rest circled back into events, PR, and overhead. The foundation didn't serve communities. It served Constance. No one said this out loud, of course. No one needed to. In rooms like the Bellamy, wealth was its own truth, and questioning it was the only real offense. Constance moved through the gala the way she moved through life. Slowly, deliberately, expecting the world to arrange itself around her pace. She stopped at a table, adjusted a centerpiece that was already perfect, and then glanced over her shoulder toward the service station where Wesley and Nina were staging appetizer trays. She didn't speak to them. She spoke to her assistant, loud enough for them to hear. They really should dress the help differently. A guest almost handed her coat to one of them last year. Nina's jaw tightened. Wesley kept his eyes on the tray. He'd learned a long time ago that the safest place to look when someone was trying to shrink you was down. Not because you believed you were small, but because looking up meant giving them what they wanted. A reaction. Constance moved on. She stopped at the bar and snapped her fingers at the bartender without looking at him. Sparkling, not still. I shouldn't have to say that twice in 5 years. Her voice wasn't loud.
It didn't need to be. Constance Hargrove had the kind of authority that made whispering feel like shouting. Every word carried because every person in the room had already decided it mattered. There was one moment, though, a small one, easy to miss if you weren't watching.
As Constance passed the Steinway, her right hand drifted to her left wrist. She wore a thin gold bracelet, simple, almost plain compared to everything else on her. A small charm hung from it, a treble clef. Her fingers closed around it for half a second. Her pace slowed. Her expression, the mask she wore so well, cracked. Just barely. Just enough. Her publicist noticed. She touched Constance's elbow gently and steered her toward the head table. Constance let herself be guided. She didn't look at the piano again. On the Foundation's display table near the entrance, between the donor pamphlets and the auction catalog, there was a framed photograph. A teenage boy sitting at a piano, bright eyes, messy hair, a grin that hadn't learned yet to be careful. A small plaque beneath the frame read, Elliot Hargrove, 2001 to 2020. The music lives on. Guests walked past the photo all evening. Some glanced at it. None mentioned it. There was an unspoken agreement in Constance's circle. You could attend her gala, drink her wine, praise her generosity, but you did not bring up her son. Not ever. The photograph sat there anyway, quiet, unvisited, like a grave no one tends but no one removes. And across the room, Wesley Palmer carried a tray of champagne glasses past tables of people who would never know his name. The piano waited between them, patient, holding its silence the way it had all evening, but not for much longer. The evening was running on schedule until it wasn't. At 8:45, Gregory Ashworth's phone buzzed. He read the message, and the color drained from his face. The hired pianist, a conservatory graduate who had performed at the last 3 Hargrove galas, had just canceled. A text message. 2 lines. Family emergency. Not coming. Gregory stared at the phone like it had insulted him. Then he looked across the room at the empty piano bench and felt his stomach drop. He made 3 calls in 4 minutes. No one was available on a Saturday night with 0 notice. He loosened his tie. He tightened it again. He considered telling Constance. Then he considered not telling Constance. Then he considered quitting. He didn't have to choose. Constance found him first. She appeared at his shoulder the way she always did, without warning, without sound, like weather. Gregory, I'm paying $60,000 for this evening. Why is that piano silent? Mrs. Hargrove, there's been a small scheduling. I didn't ask what happened. I asked why it's silent. Gregory opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. Constance stared at him the way a cat stares at something it has already decided isn't worth catching. Then she turned away. That's when she saw Wesley. He was clearing a table near the piano. His hands moved efficiently, stacking plates, folding napkins, wiping the surface in smooth circles. But his eyes weren't on the table. They were on the Steinway. Just for a second, maybe 2. The kind of glance a person gives something they've been trying not to look at all night. Constance caught it. You! Wesley looked up. The room didn't go quiet yet, but it began to, the way sound retreats from the edges first. I saw you staring at that piano like a stray dog at a butcher's window. Wesley set down the plates. I wasn't staring, ma'am. Oh, you were. Constance took a step closer, not because she needed to, because closing distance was what she did when she wanted someone to feel smaller. Tell me, what exactly does a waiter know about a Steinway? The tables nearest to them had gone silent now. Forks set down, glasses held midair. The kind of quiet that happens when people sense something ugly is about to unfold and want to see every second of it. I've played piano since I was 6, ma'am. Constance tilted her head. The smile that crossed her face had no warmth in it whatsoever. You think those dirty black fingers can do anything on a piano besides leave stains on the keys? She said it clearly, not whispering, not muttering. She said it the way someone says something they've thought 100 times and finally decided to let out. The room heard every word. Wesley didn't move. His face didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted, the way a door locks from the inside. Oh, please, Constance waved her hand. Don't look so wounded. I saw the way you were watching that piano like it was going to save your life. Let's see if it can. She reached into her clutch and pulled out 5 crisp $100 bills. She held them up between 2 fingers so the guests at the nearest 3 tables could see. Then she threw them at Wesley's chest. The bills hit his apron and floated to the marble floor. One landed on his shoe. He didn't look down. There, pick that up. Sit your black ass on that bench. Save these folks a trip to the circus. 40 people. 40 guests in black tie, holding crystal glasses filled with wine that cost more per bottle than Wesley earned in a shift. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them moved. Some looked away. Some didn't. But the result was the same. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't mean nobody noticed. It means nobody cared enough to act. The bills lay on the floor between them like a dare. Wesley's hands were at his sides. His right index finger twitched once. That same reflex, the one he couldn't stop. The one that fired whenever a piano was close enough to touch. He looked at Constance. He looked at the money. He looked at the piano. Gregory Ashworth stood by the kitchen door, frozen. Nina Gallagher gripped a tray so hard her knuckles turned white. And Wesley Palmer stood perfectly still. The bills at his feet, the piano behind Constance. The whole room holding its breath. Part 2. Nah, hold on. Hold on. Did she really just do that? Threw money at this man like he's nothing, in front of 40 people, and nobody said a word? Imagine that's you standing there. How would you feel? Because I'm not okay right now. The money sat on the marble floor. 5 bills. $500. More than Wesley made in a week. He could pick it up, walk away, finish his shift, go home to his one-room apartment and practice on a paper keyboard taped to the wall. Nobody would blame him. Nobody would even remember his name by morning. That was the safe thing to do, the smart thing. But Wesley wasn't looking at the money. He was looking at the piano. And somewhere in the back of his mind, behind the noise of 40 staring faces and the echo of Constance Hargrove's voice still hanging in the air, he heard another voice. Older, quieter, steady as a metronome. The music doesn't leave you, son. You leave it. And it waits. Teddy. Wesley blinked. His jaw tightened. He thought about his mother in her care facility on the west side. He thought about the warehouse application sitting on his kitchen counter. He thought about the church basement on Tuesday nights, the last place on earth where his hands still remembered who they were. If he walked away now, that was it. Not just tonight. Everything. He'd sign that application tomorrow. He'd take the night shift. He'd lose Tuesdays. And the music. The thing that Teddy said would wait. would finally stop waiting. He thought about Constance's words. Dirty black fingers, stains on the keys, circus. He thought about every restaurant, every tray, every invisible shift where he smiled and nodded and disappeared into the background like furniture. Then he thought about one more thing. A melody. The most honest piece of music he'd ever heard. The one he played alone in the church basement when the world got too heavy. The one he found buried in an obscure music forum at 3 a.m. during the lowest point of his life. He never knew who wrote it. He only knew it sounded like someone telling the truth for the first and last time. That melody was in his hands right now, sitting there, waiting, the way it always did. Wesley untied his apron. Slowly, not rushing, not shaking. He folded it once, then twice. He placed it on the nearest table. The room watched. He turned and walked toward the Steinway. Each step landed on marble with a sound that was louder than it should have been, because every other sound in the room had stopped. He pulled out the bench. He sat down. Constance raised an eyebrow. A few guests exchanged glances. Wesley looked at her. No anger, no fear, just calm. "You don't have to pay me, Mrs. Hargrove. This one's free." He placed his hands on the keys. His fingers trembled. Just slightly. Just enough. He didn't play. Not yet. 5 seconds of silence. The room forgot to breathe. The first note was barely a whisper. A single key. Middle C. Pressed so softly, it almost didn't sound at all. It hung in the air, the way smoke hangs. Thin, uncertain, like it wasn't sure it had permission to exist. Then another note, a step above. Then a third, a half step down. Slow, careful. Spaced far apart, the way someone speaks when they haven't used their voice in years, and they're not sure it still works. Wesley's left hand trembled, not from fear, from time. 4 years since he'd touched a real piano. 4 years of paper keyboards and church basements and silence. His muscles remembered. His nerves didn't trust them yet. A woman at the front table leaned toward her husband and whispered, "This is painful." Her husband nodded, but didn't look away. Constance Hargrove stood 10 feet from the piano, arms folded, chin lifted. The expression on her face said everything. Amusement, confirmation, the satisfaction of being right. She had expected this. A fumbling, embarrassing attempt from a waiter who had no business sitting at a Steinway. A circus act, just like she'd ordered. But then, something shifted. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way dawn happens, so gradually that by the time you notice, the whole sky has already changed. Wesley's right hand found a phrase. 4 notes, then 8, then 12. A melody began forming, hesitant at first, then clearer, like a photograph developing in water. The notes started connecting. A musical sentence emerged, then a paragraph, then a page. Chopin, Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Wesley's posture changed. His shoulders, which had been hunched forward like a man bracing for a hit, dropped. His spine straightened. His breathing slowed. The tremble left his left hand, then his right. His fingers moved across the keys with a precision that didn't belong in a waiter's uniform. By the 12th measure, the fumbling was gone. What replaced it was something the room wasn't prepared for. This wasn't a party trick. This wasn't a man who had learned a few chords and memorized the piece to impress people at dinner parties. This was conservatory-level technique, Clean octave reaches, precise pedal work, dynamic control that moved from pianissimo to forte and back again like breathing. This was a man who had trained for years, performed for thousands of hours, and then stopped. And now he was starting again.
The woman at the front table set down her fork. Her husband set down his glass. Neither of them whispered again. Nina Gallagher stood by the kitchen door. She had worked with Wesley for 2 years. She had seen him tap rhythms on countertops during slow shifts, seen his fingers move absently across table edges like they were searching for something. She always assumed it was a nervous habit. She didn't know it was grief.
Now she watched his hands move across that Steinway and pressed her own hand against her mouth. Her eyes filled. Gregory Ashworth had been walking toward the piano. His intention was to stop this, to apologize to Mrs. Hargrove, pull Wesley aside, end the embarrassment before it got worse. But somewhere between the kitchen door and the piano, the music caught him. He stopped mid-stride. He leaned against the wall. He didn't move again. Wesley transitioned. The Chopin faded, not abruptly, but like a river changing direction. The classical structure dissolved into something looser. Jazz. A walking bass line in the left hand, syncopated chords in the right. Improvised, rhythmically complex. The kind of playing that can't be faked because it doesn't come from a sheet. It comes from somewhere behind the ribs, somewhere between memory and instinct. This was Teddy Dawson's fingerprint. Saturday mornings in Bronzeville. An old upright piano with a crack in the cabinet. A blind man's hand on a young man's shoulder saying, "Don't think. Listen. The music already knows where it wants to go." Wesley was listening now, and the music was going somewhere no one in that room expected. The sound expanded. It filled the corners of the Bellamy the way water fills a glass, completely, pressing against every surface. The chandeliers seemed to vibrate. The candlelight flickered. The room itself seemed to lean in. A guest at table 6 set down her wine glass. She didn't pick it up again. A man at table 2 uncrossed his arms and placed both hands flat on the tablecloth, as if he needed to steady himself. Derek Samuels, sitting near the back wall, quietly lifted his phone and pressed record. His hands were not steady. And Constance Hargrove, arms still folded, chin still lifted, was no longer smiling. The amusement was gone from her face. Something else was forming. Something she didn't recognize and didn't want to. Her publicist leaned toward her ear. "Constance, should we?" Constance waved her off. She didn't take her eyes off Wesley. The jazz passage built and built. Layers of harmony stacking on top of each other. The left hand driving, the right hand soaring. The sound filled every inch of the room until it felt like the walls might not be enough to hold it. Then Wesley stopped. His hands hovered above the keys, fingers spread, not touching, not moving. 3 full seconds of silence. The room was terrified, not because something had gone wrong, but because they didn't know if it was over. The music had become the air they were breathing, and now it was gone, and they didn't know what to do with the emptiness. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Wesley closed his eyes. His chest rose once, fell. Then his hands came down. A new piece. Not Chopin, not jazz, something else entirely. A melody that didn't announce itself. It arrived, gently, like a hand on your shoulder from someone you thought you'd never see again. It was simple at first. a right-hand melody over a sparse left-hand accompaniment, almost childlike in its structure. But there was something inside it, a weight, a sadness, a longing, that made simplicity feel like the bravest choice a composer could make. No one in the room recognized it, except one person. Constance Hargrove's right hand moved to her left wrist. Her fingers found the treble clef bracelet. She gripped it. The melody continued. It opened up. The left hand began to move, not randomly, but with intention. The bass notes forming a counter melody that wove around the right hand like two voices having a conversation. A mother and a son. A question and an answer. A goodbye that never got finished. Constance's lips parted. Her eyes widened. Not in surprise, in recognition. The kind of recognition that happens below the brain, in the body, in the bones. She knew these notes. She knew this melody. She had heard it once before, played on a different piano, in a different room, by different hands, hands that had been still for 6 years. The piece was called Letter to Elliot. Elliot Hargrove composed it when he was 18, a year before the car accident that killed him. He never performed it publicly, never submitted it to a competition. He uploaded it to an obscure online music forum under a pseudonym. Just an audio file, no name, no biography, no context. A teenager putting something honest into the world and hoping someone would hear it. Almost no one did. But Wesley Palmer did. 3 years ago, during a night he doesn't like to talk about, a night when the walls of his apartment felt like they were closing in, and the paper piano on the wall looked like a joke, and the distance between who he was and who he was supposed to be felt infinite and permanent. He couldn't sleep. He opened his laptop and scrolled through amateur compositions, a thing he did sometimes to remind himself that music still existed somewhere, even if it had stopped existing in his life. He found a file with no title, just a date. He pressed play. And for 3 minutes and 42 seconds, a stranger's piano told him the truth. About loss, about love that doesn't end just because the person does, about the space between what you wanted to say and what you actually said before it was too late. Wesley learned the piece note for note. He played it in the church basement on Tuesday nights. He played it when the world felt too heavy to carry. It was the most important piece of music in his personal life. And he had no idea who wrote it. Until now, sitting at this Steinway, playing it from memory, the piece was just a melody he carried, a private thing, a prayer without an address. He didn't know Elliot Hargrove. He didn't know the boy in the photograph on the display table. He didn't know that the woman who had just thrown money at his chest was listening to her dead son's voice come back to life through a stranger's hands. Constance's face changed, not slowly this time. It broke. First measure of recognition. Her hand gripped the bracelet until her knuckles went white. Fourth measure. Her lips pressed together. Her chin trembled. Eighth measure. Her eyes filled. Not gently, not gradually. They flooded, the way a dam breaks, all at once and without warning. 12th measure. She stood up from her chair. The legs scraped against the floor. Her publicist reached for her arm. Constance shook her off. Final measures. Constance Hargrove, the woman who controlled every room she entered, the woman who hadn't shown weakness in front of another human being since her son's funeral, covered her face with both hands and broke down, sobbing, openly, in front of every guest she had ever needed to impress. Wesley played the last phrase, a descending melody, 4 notes. 3, 2, 1. A single sustained note that hung in the air like the last breath of a conversation that was finally, after 6 years, complete. He lifted his hands from the keys. Slowly. The way you lift your hands from something sacred. His eyes were closed. 4 seconds of silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound in the Bellamy was Constance Hargrove crying. Then, from the back of the room, one pair of hands. Slow, deliberate clapping. Then another. Then a third. Then the room erupted. Chairs pushed back. People stood. The applause wasn't polite. It wasn't the kind you give at a charity auction when a painting sells for more than expected. It was visceral, raw, the kind that comes from the chest, not the hands. Derek Samuels kept his phone raised. The video was still recording. His screen was blurred because his own eyes were wet.
Nina Gallagher stood at the kitchen door, crying openly, her tray forgotten on the counter behind her. Gregory Ashworth leaned against the wall with his arms crossed and his head down, shaking it slowly. Not in disapproval, in disbelief. And Wesley Palmer sat at the piano with his eyes still closed, his hands resting in his lap, and for the first time in 4 years, he didn't feel invisible. The applause lasted a long time. Longer than was comfortable. Longer than anyone planned. It wasn't the kind that fades politely after a few seconds. It kept going, fed by something deeper than appreciation. It was the sound of a room full of people who had just witnessed something they couldn't explain and weren't ready to let go of yet. Wesley opened his eyes. He didn't stand. He didn't bow. He sat at the bench with his hands in his lap, breathing slowly, like a man who had just surfaced from very deep water. The clapping softened, then it stopped. Not because the room lost interest, but because something else was happening. Constance Hargrove was walking toward the piano. The crowd parted without being asked. Guests stepped aside, pulled chairs in, cleared a path. No one told them to. They just did. The way people move when they can feel the weight of a moment passing through the room. Constance's face was wrecked. Mascara streaked down both cheeks. Her lips were pressed together so hard they'd lost their color. She moved slowly, not with her usual deliberate elegance, but with the unsteady steps of someone whose legs weren't fully cooperating. The armor she had worn all evening, all year, all decade, was gone. What was left was just a woman, a mother, walking toward the sound of something she had lost. She stopped 3 feet from the piano bench. Wesley stood. They faced each other. The room held its breath for the second time that night. A long pause. 5 seconds. 10. The kind of silence that feels like it has a pulse. Constance spoke first. Her voice was barely above a whisper, broken at the edges. "Where did you learn that piece?" Wesley's voice was steady, quiet, not cold, just calm. The calm of a man who had already survived the hardest part. "I found it online, years ago. I don't know who wrote it. I just know it's the most honest thing I've ever heard." Constance's face crumbled. Fresh tears. Not the dramatic kind, the helpless kind. The kind that come when a door you thought was sealed shut suddenly opens, and you're not ready for what's behind it. "My son wrote it." Her voice cracked on the word son. She pressed her hand to her chest. "Elliot. He died 6 years ago. No one." She stopped, swallowed, tried again. "No one has ever played it for me." The room didn't gasp.
It didn't murmur. It did something worse. It went completely, absolutely still. The kind of still that happens when an entire room of people realizes they are standing inside someone else's grief, and there is nowhere to look away. Constance's gaze drifted downward, past Wesley, past the bench, to the floor. The $100 bills were still there, 5 of them, scattered on the marble where they had landed when she threw them at his chest. They looked different now, smaller, ugly, like evidence at a crime scene no one had bothered to clean up. She stared at them, and for the first time all evening, maybe for the first time in years, Constance Hargrove saw herself clearly. Her mouth opened. Her voice came out small. I am so sorry. 3 words. No excuse behind them, no explanation, no performance, just 3 words that cost more than everything in her clutch. Wesley looked at her. There was no triumph in his eyes, no satisfaction, no gloating. He didn't need her to be small. He never did. You don't owe me money, Mrs. Hargrove. You owe yourself a better way of seeing people. 17 words. Said without raising his voice, without sharpness, without cruelty. The kind of sentence that doesn't attack. It opens a door and lets you decide whether to walk through it. Constance didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She nodded once, slowly, the way a person nods when they've just heard something they know they'll be thinking about for a very long time. She sat down in the nearest chair. Her publicist brought her water. Her hands shook as she took the glass. For the first time all evening, Constance Hargrove looked like a human being instead of an institution. And the $500 bills stayed on the floor. Nobody picked them up. Nobody needed to. They had already served their purpose, not as money, but as a mirror. The gala didn't end after Wesley played, but it changed. The way a room changes after a window breaks. Same walls, same furniture, same people, but the air is different now. Something had come in that wasn't there before, and it wasn't leaving. Wesley stood up from the piano bench. He didn't know what to do with his hands. For 4 years they had carried plates and folded napkins and pressed silently against paper keyboards on a wall. Now, they had just done the thing they were built for, and he didn't have a plan for what came after. He didn't need one. The room came to him. The first person to approach was a man Wesley had served a gin and tonic to earlier that evening. The man hadn't looked at him then, hadn't even said thank you. Now, he was standing in front of Wesley with his hand extended. That was the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard in this room. Wesley shook his hand. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Then another guest. Then another. Then a woman in a dark green dress who introduced herself with a card instead of a compliment. Lorraine Whitfield, director of the Whitfield Arts Foundation. She was a small woman with short silver hair and glasses that made her eyes look twice their size. She didn't gush. She didn't cry. She looked at Wesley the way a builder looks at a structure, assessing, measuring, calculating what it could become. I fund artists, not resumes. Call me Monday. She pressed the card into his hand, squeezed once, and walked away. No small talk, no conditions. Just a door left open. Derek Samuels found Wesley near the service station 10 minutes later. He held up his phone. The screen showed a video, the last 2 minutes of Wesley's performance, slightly shaky, slightly out of focus, but clear enough. The audio was clean. I posted this 12 minutes ago. It already has 9,000 views. Wesley stared at the screen. He watched his own hands on the keys, hands he had been ashamed of for 4 years, and didn't recognize them. They looked like they belonged to someone who hadn't given up. The video would reach 200,000 views by midnight, 1 million by Monday morning, 11 million by the end of the week. Comment sections would fill with people who had never been to the Bellamy, never heard of Constance Hargrove, never met Wesley Palmer, but who recognized the feeling. The feeling of being made invisible. The feeling of being underestimated. The feeling of sitting down at the thing you were born to do and proving that it never left you, even when you left it.
But that was later. Right now, Wesley was still standing in a restaurant in a waiter's uniform, with a business card in one hand and nothing in the other. Constance found him near the coat check as the gala was winding down. She looked different now, smaller, not physically, but the space she took up in the room had shrunk. Her posture had softened. Her chin, which had been tilted upward all night, was level. She held out her left hand. In her palm was the bracelet, the thin gold chain with the treble clef charm, the one she had touched every time she passed the piano, the one she had worn every day since Elliot died. Elliot would have wanted you to have this. Wesley looked at the bracelet. He didn't reach for it. Mrs. Hargrove, I can't take that. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference. He hesitated. Then he understood. This wasn't charity. It wasn't guilt. It was something rarer. Trust. The kind that comes after a wall falls down and two people are standing in the rubble, and one of them hands the other the only thing that still matters. Wesley took the bracelet. He held it carefully, the way you hold something that belongs to someone who can't hold it anymore. I'll take care of it. Constance nodded. She didn't say anything else. She turned and walked toward the door. Her publicist followed. Her assistants followed. But for the first time all evening, she wasn't leading a procession. She was just a woman leaving a room. The next morning, Wesley drove to Bronzeville. He parked on Teddy Dawson's street. The same cracked sidewalk, the same front porch with the paint peeling off the railing. He hadn't been here in 8 months. He stood at the door for a full minute before he knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow. The door opened. Teddy was 81. His eyes were clouded. He couldn't see Wesley's face. But he heard the footsteps on the porch, and he knew. Took you long enough, Wesley laughed. The kind of laugh that comes out when you've been holding something too tight for too long, and you finally let go. He sat down at Teddy's old upright piano, the one with the crack in the cabinet, the one where it all started, and he played Letter to Elliot. Every note from memory. Teddy sat in his chair with his eyes closed and one hand on Wesley's shoulder. He didn't speak until the last note faded. That's the sound of a man who stopped running. Wesley didn't answer. He didn't need to. The piano had already said everything. 3 weeks later, Wesley received a letter from the Whitfield Arts Foundation. A full fellowship, 12 months of funding to compose and perform. No audition, no committee, just Lorraine Whitfield keeping her word. He never signed the warehouse application. The viral video did what viral videos do. It traveled. It reached people who didn't know Wesley's name, but knew his feeling. News outlets picked it up. Music blogs shared it. A producer at the Chicago Symphony Center watched it on a Tuesday morning, set down his coffee, and made a phone call. Wesley was invited to perform at Symphony Center the following spring. His first professional concert. He dedicated it to everyone who was told to be invisible. Constance Hargrove didn't disappear. She did something harder. She changed.
She restructured the Hargrove Foundation from the ground up, fired the publicist, cut the gala budget in half, redirected the money into the thing the foundation was supposed to fund all along: actual programs for actual people. She created a new scholarship in Eliot's name, specifically for musicians from underserved communities. Wesley sat on the advisory board. They never became friends. That would be too neat, too simple. But they exchanged a few words at the scholarship's first awards ceremony. Constance looked at Wesley and said, "Thank you for bringing him back, even for a few minutes." Wesley nodded. That was enough. Teddy Dawson listened to the Symphony Center performance on a radio in his living room in Bronzeville. He couldn't see the stage. He didn't need to. He heard everything. When the broadcast ended, he leaned back in his chair and said to no one in particular, "I told that boy the music would wait." It did. Sometimes talent doesn't arrive on schedule. Sometimes it shows up in a waiter's apron, on a night no one expected, at a piano no one invited it to play. And sometimes the people who try hardest to make you small are the ones carrying the biggest emptiness inside them. They don't need your anger. They need the thing you almost gave up on, played loud enough to shake loose what they've been hiding. Subscribe and hit the bell, because next week we're telling the story of a janitor who silenced an entire courtroom. You don't want to miss that one. This is the Unseen series. Stories about ordinary people with extraordinary gifts who refuse to stay invisible. New episode every week. Bro. 40 people and nobody said a word? That's insane. Now imagine that's you standing there. What would you do? Drop it in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Next week's story? Even crazier. Don't miss it.